Certain wilderness regions hide forces that can overturn camps, rupture quiet trails, and send seasoned travelers scrambling for survival. Heavy footfalls, shattered gear, and sudden charges turn routine days into frantic fights against raw strength. From an Alaskan RV park in flames to a coastal kayak ambush in Kodiak, each event reveals nature's brutal edge. In this video, we'll uncover 6 chilling encounters. On November 9th, 2025, a remote recreational vehicle park located roughly 40 miles northwest of the small Alaskan town of Talkeetna became the site of an unprecedented wildlife incident that left 2 people injured and several structures ruined by fire. The park sat between dense spruce forests and a winding creek bed and had operated seasonally for nearly 3 decades, serving summer travelers and late autumn hunters. By early November, most visitors had departed, leaving behind only a sparse group of late-season occupants who either preferred isolation or lacked the means to travel before winter fully arrived. The region had always been known for frequent wildlife movement. Black bears occasionally wandered through during berry season, and moose regularly appeared near the creek. Grizzly bears, however, rarely entered the area, preferring higher ridges and distant river systems. That autumn brought unusual reports from local wildlife personnel. An early freeze had damaged the natural food supply in the mountains, forcing larger predators to descend into lower valleys where human activity was common. Waste handling at the park had slipped as the season wound down, with dumpsters overflowing and food remnants left exposed near picnic spots. 3 campers remained at the park during that weekend. Tom Riddick, a retired construction worker from Anchorage, kept his aging motorhome near the eastern edge of the grounds, where he could access the propane refill station. Sarah Kelmont, a freelance photographer, stayed in a compact trailer closer to the communal fire pit, her vehicle packed with camera equipment and winter gear. Mike Delarue, a seasonal hunting guide, was camped near the maintenance shed, repairing his truck's failing transmission before heading south. Weather conditions deteriorated quickly that Saturday. Light flurries shifted into a full snowstorm by nightfall. Winds surged above 30 miles per hour, and visibility dropped sharply. Temperatures fell below freezing, and the park's outdated electrical system strained under the demand for heating. Tom monitored his propane heater throughout the evening, concerned about the pilot light flickering in the wind. Shortly after 9, he stepped outside to inspect the connections, worried that a malfunction could leave him without heat for the night. A grizzly bear emerged from the tree line at that moment. It weighed an estimated 600 pounds, its fur crusted with ice, and it had been drawn toward the park by the strong scent of decaying food from the unsecured dumpsters and the lingering aroma of cooked fish near Sarah's trailer. The animal appeared thin and stressed, its ribs pressing through its coat. Hunger had overridden its usual avoidance of humans. Tom descended from his motorhome with a flashlight and immediately sensed danger. The air felt unnervingly still despite the storm, and a harsh, musky odor drifted through the snowfall. Before he could retreat, the bear surged forward from behind a cluster of garbage bins, crossing the distance in seconds. The impact knocked him back into a wooden support post near his propane tanks. The bear's claws tore across his chest, shredding his heavy jacket and leaving deep wounds. His shoulder struck the post hard enough to dislocate it, and he collapsed into the snow, stunned and struggling to breathe. The noise drew Sarah's attention as she organized equipment inside her trailer. She opened her door and saw the attack through the swirling snow. In her panic, she accidentally toppled a portable propane canister near the entrance. Its loosened valve snapped open when it hit the ground, releasing gas into the frigid air. A spark from her trailer's exterior light ignited the vapor, and a sudden burst of flame engulfed the area beside her trailer. Fire spread quickly to a nearby wooden picnic table, piled with dry leaves and neglected trash. Driven by wind and debris, the fire expanded rapidly. Thick smoke mixed with falling snow, creating a disorienting haze. Startled by the explosion of flame and noise, the bear spun around, momentarily confused. Sarah slipped on the icy ground while Tom tried to crawl toward his motorhome, leaving streaks of blood in the snow. Mike had been inside the maintenance shed when he heard the commotion. He grabbed a metal folding chair and ran toward the chaos. The scene ahead seemed unreal. Flames engulfing the picnic area, Tom injured near his RV, Sarah trapped between her burning trailer and the circling bear, and heavy snow distorting every shape and shadow. The bear turned toward Mike and charged again. He struck its snout with the folding chair, but the blow barely slowed it. A sweeping paw carved through his pant leg and deep into his thigh, knocking him to the ground. Blood spread rapidly through the snow beneath him. For nearly an hour, the three campers fought for survival. Despite their injuries, they coordinated instinctively. Tom retrieved a shovel from his motorhome and used it to create noise and temporary barriers. Sarah located emergency flares in her survival kit and lit them, generating bright bursts of red sparks that confused the animal. Mike, though severely wounded, used burning branches from the spreading fire to keep the bear at a distance. Flames soon reached a storage shed containing old furniture and paint cans, and the resulting explosion sent shards of light and debris through the storm, further unsettling the Grizzly. The bear circled repeatedly, lunging forward and retreating as the survivors defended themselves with noise, fire, and improvised tools. It swatted burning debris aside, bellowed into the storm, and made several probing advances, each one met with renewed resistance. At last the bear hesitated, backed toward the tree line, paused briefly, and then vanished into the dark forest. The storm continued for hours, gradually smothering the smaller fires, although the storage shed burned until morning. 2 campers suffered serious injuries requiring medical evacuation once the storm cleared. The RV park sustained extensive fire damage, with multiple structures destroyed and several vehicles impacted. Wildlife personnel later confirmed evidence consistent with a food-stressed grizzly, prompting immediate changes to waste management policies in rural Alaskan recreation areas. On July 14, 2023, the southwestern coastline of the Kodiak archipelago revealed itself as a labyrinth of jagged rocks, narrow inlets, and pebble beaches sculpted by centuries of tidal erosion. The region had long been known as prime habitat for Kodiak bears, the largest brown bear subspecies in existence, with some mature males reaching weights exceeding 1,400 pounds. These immense predators thrived on the archipelago's salmon runs, coastal vegetation, and rich intertidal resources, encountering humans only rarely in the more remote shoreline areas that remained accessible solely by boat or kayak. Ryan Kim, a 29-year-old adventure filmmaker from Seattle, had spent the previous week documenting sea lion colonies and coastal glaciers for an environmental documentary project. His single-person kayak, loaded with waterproof camera gear, camping supplies, and emergency equipment, had carried him along nearly 60 miles of pristine coastline. Ryan had studied the area extensively and understood the risks associated with traveling through established bear territory, yet he felt confident in his preparation, field experience, and previous expeditions throughout Alaska and British Columbia. That afternoon, Ryan noticed a narrow pebble beach tucked between 2 rocky outcroppings, an ideal location to set up time-lapse cameras aimed at capturing the evening light as it reflected off a distant glacier face. The beach stretched roughly 40 feet and was bordered by dense alder thickets and salmonberry bushes marking the edge of the coastal forest. He guided his kayak toward shore, pulling it partially onto the smooth stones before unloading his tripod and camera cases. What Ryan failed to observe, however, were the indicators of recent bear activity near the tree line. Fresh scat lay partially concealed beneath a patch of beach grass, and several alder trunks showed claw marks from foraging. A large Kodiak bear, estimated at over 900 pounds, had been feeding on salmon berries and overturning shoreline rocks in search of crabs and small fish. The animal had settled in the shaded undergrowth, resting approximately 30 yards from where Ryan was now working. Ryan knelt beside the kayak as he secured a camera mount to the bow for additional coastal footage. Focused entirely on his equipment, he reached into his dry bag for cleaning supplies and spare lenses. At that moment, the bear emerged from the tree line. Its approach was masked by the rhythmic crash of waves against the rocks and the rustling of wind through the beach grass. The animal might have perceived Ryan's presence as an unexpected intrusion upon its feeding grounds, or it may simply have been startled by the sudden appearance of a human within its immediate space. The charge spanned the distance in seconds. Ryan registered only a blur of dark fur before the bear's paw struck his shoulder, spinning him sideways. The blow sent him careening into his kayak, which toppled and skidded across the slick pebbles before flipping into the shallow surf. Ryan slammed into the water, cold seawater immediately saturating his clothing and filling his boots. The shock of the frigid temperature briefly immobilized him, but adrenaline forced him to kick and crawl as he fought for stability on the submerged rocks. Jagged stones tore at his arms as he struggled toward a nearby boulder that rose just above the waterline. His left forearm scraped across a sharp edge, opening a deep gash that bled heavily. Barnacle-covered surfaces ripped at his torso as he pulled himself upward, leaving lacerations across his ribs and abdomen. At last, he managed to haul himself onto the boulder's flat surface, gasping as violent shivers signaled the onset of hypothermia. Below him, the bear methodically patrolled the shoreline, sniffing at the overturned kayak and scattered equipment. It nosed through Ryan's dry bags, spreading clothing, food containers, and camera accessories across the pebble field. The bear exhibited no immediate aggression toward Ryan, but displayed unmistakable territorial behavior, unwilling to abandon the area while an unfamiliar presence remained within its domain. Ryan spotted his paddle drifting near the boulder and managed to retrieve it. Mustering the energy he had left, he shouted repeatedly and waved the paddle above his head. His emergency flare gun remained clipped to his life vest, and with trembling hands he fired a flare into the sky. The red projectile arced upward, trailing smoke and sparks. The sudden light and sharp hiss startled the bear, which huffed and took several steps back. For nearly 20 minutes, the standoff continued. Ryan discharged 2 additional flares, each one driving the bear farther from the immediate area. Meanwhile, his body temperature continued to fall, his speech slurred, and his movements grew increasingly sluggish. At last, the bear withdrew into the forest, apparently concluding that the intruder no longer posed a challenge or simply losing interest in the persistent noise and light. Ryan remained on the boulder for another 15 minutes, ensuring the animal had fully retreated. When he finally attempted to move, he half slid and half fell from the rock before dragging himself along the shoreline. His backup communication team was stationed at a small research camp roughly 3 miles north. Using a combination of crawling, stumbling, and pausing to steady himself, Ryan began the slow and exhausting journey toward help. His bleeding wounds, the cold, and his worsening disorientation created a grueling ordeal that stretched across 4 hours. The rescue team discovered him barely conscious, suffering from advanced hypothermia, significant blood loss, and multiple deep lacerations. He was evacuated by emergency transport to a regional hospital, where he underwent surgery for his injuries and several days of treatment for complications associated with prolonged exposure to cold. The incident underscored the extreme risks associated with solo coastal travel in bear-dominated landscapes and highlighted the unpredictable nature of wildlife encounters in remote Alaskan wilderness areas. On September 22, 2024, the Blue Ridge Mountains of western North Carolina stretched across the landscape in rolling waves of ancient peaks, their slopes densely covered with oak, hickory, and mountain laurel. The region had supported human habitation for thousands of years, yet large sections remained rugged and isolated, accessible only via narrow trails winding through dense forest and steep ridgelines. Black bear populations had rebounded significantly over the previous 3 decades, with estimated numbers exceeding 8,000 across the mountain range. These bears generally avoided human contact, feeding on acorns, berries, and small woodland prey. Daniel Harper, a 34-year-old environmental consultant from Asheville, had been hiking the mountain trails for more than a decade. He possessed extensive backcountry experience, carried appropriate safety equipment, and maintained a healthy respect for wildlife. That weekend, He planned a solo trek along a remote ridge, known for both challenging terrain and spectacular views. He had informed his friend Marcus of his intended route and expected return time, following a safety protocol he never neglected. Early Saturday morning, Daniel messaged Marcus to report his departure from the trailhead. He noted unusually strong winds, limited visibility due to low-hanging clouds, and the surprising abundance of late-season berries still clinging to bushes along the lower slopes. The unseasonably warm autumn had extended the growing season, creating ideal foraging conditions for bears preparing for winter hibernation. The ridge trail climbed steadily through mixed hardwood forest before emerging onto exposed rock formations, offering panoramic views. As Daniel gained elevation, the weather worsened. Gusts of wind forced him to watch his footing carefully, and fog reduced visibility to less than 50 feet. Experienced enough to navigate by compass and terrain features rather than relying solely on visual landmarks, Daniel continued cautiously. By late afternoon, when Daniel failed to send a scheduled check-in message, Marcus became concerned. Daniel had never missed a check-in during their years of friendship, understanding the critical importance of communication in backcountry travel. After waiting 2 additional hours, Marcus contacted local search and rescue authorities, providing Daniel's planned route and last known position. A search team assembled quickly, beginning operations at first light Sunday morning. The terrain posed serious challenges: steep slopes, dense undergrowth, and numerous ravines cutting through the ridge system. Searchers spread out along Daniel's intended route, calling his name and watching for signs of passage. Mid-morning, approximately 3 miles from the trailhead, the team discovered Daniel's backpack near a narrow ravine. The pack had been violently torn open, its contents scattered across a 20-foot radius. Food containers lay crushed and emptied, marked by clear punctures. Energy bar wrappers, trail mix bags, and dried fruit packages littered the forest floor. Nearby trees bore fresh claw marks, gouged deep into the bark, indicating a black bear had been actively foraging in the immediate area. This discovery prompted a more intensive search. 2 hours later, rescuers found Daniel roughly 100 yards downslope from his pack, behind a fallen log at the base of the ravine. He was unresponsive. Emergency medical personnel confirmed that his injuries had been fatal. Wildlife officials conducted a detailed investigation of the scene. Evidence suggested that Daniel had been hiking along the ridge trail when he rounded a blind corner where dense mountain laurel and rhododendron created a narrow tunnel barely wide enough for a person to pass. The vegetation prevented advance warning of what lay ahead. A black bear, likely a male weighing between 200 and 300 pounds based on track measurements, had been foraging intensively on berry bushes along that section of trail. The unusually abundant berry crop had focused the bear's attention in that precise area. When Daniel rounded the corner, he was within 15 feet of the bear, too close for either to retreat safely. Investigators determined the encounter had been defensive rather than predatory. The bear had not been stalking Daniel or attempting to treat him as prey. Instead, the sudden, close proximity meeting in confined terrain had triggered a defensive response from an animal that felt threatened and had limited escape options. Food scents from Daniel's pack may have worsened the situation, though they were not the primary cause. Physical evidence indicated Daniel had tried to back away when he encountered the bear, but the narrow trail and dense vegetation left no room to maneuver. The confined space prevented effective use of bear spray, and the element of surprise eliminated any opportunity for defensive measures. Following the initial encounter, Daniel appeared to attempt moving downslope away from the bear, but his injuries proved too severe. The black bear left the scene after the encounter, showing no indication of viewing Daniel as prey. This distinction was critical for understanding the nature of the incident. The animal defended what it perceived as personal space and access to food, then moved on, a behavior consistent with defensive rather than predatory encounters. The incident shocked the regional hiking community and local residents. Black bears were common throughout the Blue Ridge Mountains, yet fatal encounters remained extremely rare. Daniel's death marked the first such incident in the state in over a decade. Wildlife officials emphasized that the tragedy resulted from a convergence of unfortunate circumstances. Dense vegetation creating blind corners, concentrated food sources attracting bears to trails, and the coincidental timing that placed human and bear together in a confined space. Following the event, authorities renewed emphasis on hiking safety in bear country, highlighting the importance of awareness when navigating blind corners, managing food scents, and understanding that even relatively small black bears could become dangerous when surprised or defending resources in confined terrain. The tragedy served as a stark reminder of both the resilience of wildlife and the unpredictable risks of remote backcountry travel. On January 18, 2022, the Kenai Peninsula's remote railway corridor cut through vast stretches of wilderness where spruce forests met frozen wetlands and snow-covered tundra. The railway had been constructed decades earlier to transport freight and occasional passengers between coastal towns and interior settlements, but winter service remained sparse, with trains passing through certain sections only once or twice weekly. The tracks themselves often served as travel corridors for wildlife, offering packed snow and easier passage compared to the deep drifts accumulating in surrounding forests. Brown bears occasionally remained active during winter months on the Kenai Peninsula, particularly younger males that had not accumulated sufficient fat reserves for full hibernation. These animals moved through the landscape seeking any available food sources, from winter-killed moose carcasses to cached salmon remains frozen in creek beds. Railway bridges and overpasses provided shelter from bitter winds, making them attractive resting spots for bears attempting to conserve energy during the harshest season. Olivia Grant, a 27-year-old wildlife technician employed by a regional environmental consulting firm, had been assigned to conduct winter vegetation surveys along a 12-mile stretch of railway. Her work involved documenting invasive plant species, assessing erosion patterns, and collecting samples for later analysis. The assignment required hiking along the tracks, carefully navigating the icy railbed while maintaining awareness of her surroundings. That particular morning, temperatures hovered around 15 degrees Fahrenheit, with clear skies and minimal wind. Olivia had started her survey at dawn, working methodically along the tracks while recording observations in her field notebook. She wore insulated boots with traction cleats, carried a heavy pack containing sampling equipment, and had checked the train schedule carefully before beginning her work. No trains were expected through this section until the following afternoon. By mid-morning, Olivia reached a curve in the tracks where the railway passed over a small creek via a steel and timber bridge. The structure stood roughly 8 feet above the frozen waterway, its underside sheltered from wind and precipitation. She knelt beside the tracks near the curve, pulling sample bags from her pack to collect vegetation specimens from the embankment. The sound reached her first, a deep, huffing exhalation that immediately triggered alarm. Olivia turned her head sharply and saw a brown bear emerging from beneath the bridge structure, its fur thick with winter coat and dusted with snow. The animal had clearly been using the space as a windbreak, possibly for several days based on the packed snow and matted vegetation visible near the bridge supports. The bear appeared as startled as Olivia, having been roused from rest by her presence directly above its shelter. The animal's surprise quickly shifted to defensive posturing as it moved toward the embankment, testing whether this intruder represented a threat. Olivia scrambled backward instinctively, her boots slipping on ice that had formed between the rails. Her right foot caught on a rail tie, and she went down hard, her knee striking the steel rail with enough force to send pain shooting through her leg. The impact tore ligaments and left her gasping, unable to stand properly. Her pack tumbled from her shoulders, striking the ground and bursting open. Food wrappers from her lunch, energy bars, and trail mix scattered across the tracks along with metal sampling tools, flagging tape, and field notebooks. The sudden cascade of items and noise further agitated the bear, which had now climbed fully onto the rail bed. The animal approached the scattered equipment cautiously, sniffing at the unfamiliar objects. A massive paw swiped at Olivia's pack, sending it sliding several feet down the tracks. Metal calipers and soil probes clattered against the rails, creating sharp metallic sounds that echoed in the cold air. Olivia dragged herself backward, her injured knee screaming with each movement. She spotted a signal control box roughly 15 feet away, a metal housing mounted on a concrete base beside the tracks. Crawling and half-sliding across the icy surface, she reached the structure and pressed herself behind it, using the metal box as a barrier between herself and the bear. Her radio remained clipped to her belt, and she activated it with trembling fingers. Rather than speaking into it, which might further provoke the bear with her voice, she held the radio against the metal housing and pressed the transmit button repeatedly. The resulting feedback and electronic squealing created harsh, unnatural sounds that confused the bear. Olivia pounded on the metal box with her fist, adding to the cacophony. The bear circled the scattered equipment, occasionally swatting at items but showing increasing agitation at the strange noises. The animal huffed repeatedly, its breath forming white clouds in the frigid air. For nearly 10 minutes, the standoff continued. Olivia maintained her position behind the signal box, periodically creating noise to keep the bear uncertain and prevent it from approaching closer. Her knee throbbed with increasing intensity, and she could feel it swelling inside her boot. The cold seeped through her clothing where she pressed against the frozen ground. Finally, the bear's interest waned. The animal moved back toward the bridge, pausing at the embankment to look back once before descending beneath the structure and disappearing into the forest beyond the creek. Olivia waited another 20 minutes, listening for any indication the bear might return before attempting to move. She activated her radio properly and called for assistance, providing her GPS coordinates and explaining her situation. With her knee badly injured, walking back to the nearest road access point was impossible. She crawled to retrieve what remained of her pack, salvaging her emergency blanket and some equipment before settling in to wait for rescue. A maintenance crew reached her location 3 hours later, having traveled along the tracks on a motorized rail cart. They transported her to a vehicle access point where an ambulance waited. Medical examination revealed a severely sprained knee with torn ligaments, along with bruising and minor frostbite on her hands from prolonged contact with frozen metal and ground. The incident highlighted the unexpected dangers of working in industrial corridors that intersected prime wildlife habitat. Railway bridges and overpasses, while serving transportation needs, also created shelter opportunities for bears and other large animals. Olivia's experience prompted her employer to implement revised safety protocols for winter fieldwork, including mandatory 2-person teams and enhanced wildlife awareness training. She recovered fully over the following months, though the injured knee required physical therapy and limited her fieldwork capabilities for the remainder of that winter. The encounter left her with profound respect for the adaptability of brown bears and the reality that wildlife encounters could occur in the most unexpected locations, even along human-built infrastructure in the depths of winter. On November 3, 2025, the Amur region of far eastern Russia stretched across a landscape where taiga forests met agricultural settlements, creating an uneasy boundary between wilderness and human habitation. The region had experienced significant ecological stress over the previous 18 months, with unseasonably cold springs damaging crop yields and early autumn snowfall disrupting the natural food cycles that normally sustained large predator populations. Brown bears, known locally as grizzlies due to their size and temperament, had begun appearing closer to villages with increasing frequency as their traditional food sources diminished. The settlement of Tigrovka, population roughly 300, sat along a rural highway connecting several farming communities to a regional center 60 miles away. The village consisted primarily of wooden houses, small gardens, and a handful of essential services, including a general store, a small clinic, and a school. Most residents worked in agriculture or forestry and relied on a daily bus service to reach employment in nearby towns. Throughout the autumn of 2025, villagers had grown accustomed to spotting bears along the outskirts, particularly near the forest edge where berry bushes and wild apple trees offered easy foraging. Authorities issued advisories urging residents to secure garbage and avoid walking alone after dark, but many felt confident the animals would maintain their distance during daylight hours. Bears had been part of the landscape for generations, and serious incidents remained rare enough that some residents considered the warnings overly cautious. Tigrovka's bus stop was a simple wooden shelter positioned about 50 meters from the forest edge, near the point where the highway curved past abandoned agricultural buildings. The structure offered minimal protection from wind and snow, just 3 walls and a bench, and had accumulated the typical debris of rural transit points: food wrappers, cigarette butts, and stains from spilled drinks. On that cold November morning, temperatures had dropped to -8 degrees Celsius overnight, coating everything with frost and creating patches of black ice on the pavement. 6 residents gathered at the bus stop shortly after 7 o'clock, waiting for the 7:15 bus that would take them to work in the next town. Among them were factory workers, shop clerks, and a teacher heading to a regional training session. Dmitry Volkov, a 41-year-old maintenance supervisor at a timber mill, arrived carrying a canvas bag with his lunch and a thermos of tea. He set the bag on the wooden bench while greeting the other commuters, most of whom he had known for years. The bag contained leftover meat dumplings his wife had prepared the night before, their scent noticeable in the cold air. Behind the abandoned shed beside the bus stop, a large male brown bear had been investigating the area since before dawn. The animal, weighing roughly 400 kilograms, showed visible signs of inadequate fat reserves for the approaching winter. Its ribs were faintly visible beneath its thick coat, and it exhibited the agitation common in food-stressed predators. The bear had been drawn to the location by food remnants left by previous commuters, discarded sandwiches and pastries that had accumulated over several days. The bear emerged suddenly from behind the shed. For a brief moment, several people mistook it for a large dog. Recognition came within seconds, immediately followed by panic. Commuters scattered in multiple directions, some toward the road, others toward nearby houses. The icy pavement turned their attempts into chaotic stumbling, and at least 2 people slipped and fell hard on the frozen surface. Dmitry saw a young mother, Svetlana Morozova, struggling to keep her 7-year-old daughter on her feet. The child had slipped and was crying, her boots failing to gain traction on the ice. Without hesitation, Dmitry positioned himself between them and the advancing bear. He shouted for them to keep moving toward a house 50 meters away, waving his arms to hold the bear's attention. Already stressed and hungry, the bear interpreted Dmitry's movements as a threat. It charged, covering the distance in seconds. Dmitry tried to back away, but his boots slid on the ice, preventing him from gaining balance or creating any space. The other commuters, who had reached safer positions, could only watch in horror as the encounter unfolded. The attack lasted less than a minute. By the time villagers arrived with vehicles and noisemakers minutes later, the bear had already retreated toward the forest, spooked by the commotion and the approaching engines. Emergency services were called immediately, but Dmitry was found unresponsive behind the bus shelter, having sustained fatal injuries during the brief, violent encounter. Svetlana and her daughter, along with the other commuters, survived without physical injury, but were deeply traumatized by what they had witnessed. Their statements provided investigators with a clear account of the sequence of events and Dmitry's actions to protect others at the cost of his own safety. Regional wildlife authorities responded quickly, confirming the bear's food-stressed condition and its pattern of visiting the bus stop over several days. Investigators found accumulated food waste that had not been properly secured, creating a persistent attractant that drew the bear into a human-occupied area. The early snowfall and crop failures had left the animal with insufficient calories to enter hibernation, driving increasingly bold behavior near settlements. The tragedy prompted immediate changes throughout the Amur region. Villages enacted strict waste management requirements, mandating secured containers and regular collection schedules. Bus stops near forest edges received improved lighting and emergency communication devices. The region established patrol programs in high-risk areas during dawn and dusk, when hungry bears were most active. Residents waiting at isolated bus stops were urged to arrive together rather than individually, carry noisemakers or deterrent spray, and report all bear sightings promptly, instead of assuming the animals would avoid daytime activity. The long-held belief that bears could be relied upon to steer clear of people during daylight had been proven dangerously flawed. Dmitry Volkov was remembered throughout Tigrovka and surrounding communities as a man who acted selflessly in a moment of crisis. The mother and child he protected survived because of his intervention, a fact that offered some measure of meaning to an otherwise devastating loss. On March 12, 2024, the remote archipelago of Svalbard lay roughly halfway between mainland Norway and the North Pole, defined by glaciers, frozen fjords, and vast ice fields. An estimated 3,000 polar bears roamed the islands, outnumbering the human population by a significant margin. The coastline formed some of the most treacherous terrain in the Arctic, where massive ice sheets met the sea in sheer walls, fractured shelves, and narrow tidal ledges that shifted unpredictably. Scientists working in the region regularly faced dangers posed by unstable ice, frigid water, sudden storms, and the potential for wildlife encounters. Nora Vang, a 26-year-old glaciology graduate student, had arrived on Svalbard 3 weeks earlier to conduct research on coastal melt dynamics. Her work focused on measuring melt pockets formed by tidal warming. That morning, she and her research partner, Emil Johansson, set out to survey a coastal ice ledge located approximately 4 kilometers from their camp. The formation stretched along a cliff face and averaged about 3 meters in width at its broadest point, narrowing gradually as it extended toward the headland. Below, the ocean dropped 20 meters to frigid water, and although wind conditions were moderate, temperatures hovered around -12 degrees Celsius. The pair progressed methodically along the ledge, stopping every 10 meters to drill test holes and install temperature sensors. Both wore crampons and carried ice axes, ensuring they had reliable footing on the unpredictable surface. Approximately 90 minutes into their work, Nora knelt to place a sensor in a drilled hole, while Emil documented readings 10 meters behind her. In the steady rhythm of their tasks, neither noticed the polar bear that had appeared on the upper ridge above the ledge. The animal, a subadult male weighing an estimated 300 kilograms, had followed their tracks for at least half a kilometer. Despite their massive size, polar bears could move with exceptional stealth on packed snow, enabling them to approach potential prey or investigate unfamiliar scents with minimal sound. The bear's arrival on the ridge occurred without warning. Emil turned to check on Nora and caught sight of the cream-colored shape positioned directly above them. His reaction was immediate but controlled, signaling to Nora to look up while avoiding movements that might trigger the animal's instinct to charge. Nora recognized the danger instantly. The ledge offered almost no escape. Moving forward would take them into narrower and more unstable sections, while retreating would require passing directly beneath the bear. Scaling the cliff was impossible, and the drop to the ocean eliminated any option of moving downward. The bear began descending from the ridge, carefully picking its way along the sloped connection leading to the ledge. Its movements were deliberate, suggesting cautious assessment rather than immediate aggression. Still, the slope it followed would bring it directly onto the ledge and block their only practical exit. Nora attempted to back away slowly, eyes fixed on the approaching bear. Her boot encountered a patch of smooth ice polished by fluctuating temperatures and recent wind, and her feet slid out from beneath her. She fell onto her right hip, pain jolting through her pelvis and lower back. Her gloved hands scraped against the ice as she tried to steady herself, opening shallow abrasions where the rough surface tore through the glove's outer layer. The bear reached the ledge and paused, sniffing toward their equipment. It showed particular interest in a supply pack that contained emergency rations and fuel canisters. The animal moved closer, reducing the distance between itself and Nora to less than 15 meters. Emil retrieved their emergency flare gun from inside his parka, a required piece of equipment for all Arctic fieldwork. He aimed and fired a flare past the bear, striking the ice wall several meters away. The flare exploded in a burst of bright smoke and sparks, forming a temporary curtain of red light and chemical vapor between them and the bear. Startled, the bear withdrew several steps, though the narrow ledge limited how far it could back away. Emil fired a second flare, placing it directly in the bear's potential path. The thick smoke and crackling sparks created a stronger visual and sensory barrier. Nora and Emil used those few critical seconds to move laterally along the cliff wall toward a slight widening of the ledge, where a rock outcropping provided minimal cover. They pressed their backs against the ice and shuffled sideways with slow, deliberate steps. Nora's hip injury made the movement painful and precarious, and the slickness of the surface heightened the risk of another fall. The bear watched them carefully, occasionally testing the perimeter of the smoke barrier. Its uncertainty seemed to increase with each step it took, as polar bears rarely encountered fire or chemical odors in their natural environment. Emil kept the flare gun ready in his hand, prepared to use their final flare if necessary. The standoff lasted nearly 10 minutes. Eventually, the bear shifted its attention to the supply pack, nosing through the scattered items before losing interest when it found nothing edible. After a period of searching, the bear retreated the way it had come, climbing back up the slope toward the upper ridge. Only when the bear disappeared entirely from view did Nora and Emil retrieve what equipment they could safely reach. The return trip along the ledge took twice as long as the outward journey, slowed by Nora's pain and their heightened vigilance. They reached camp 3 hours later, cold, shaken, and acutely aware of the vulnerability inherent in Arctic research. Nora's hip injury required medical examination, though imaging confirmed no fractures. The incident led to immediate changes in their research protocols, including mandatory 2-person armed safety support for coastal ice work and upgraded communication devices to ensure rapid contact with emergency response teams.